welcome to the Eyes Open Network. Today is February 22nd, 2016. Today I was planning to continue our coverage of the ongoings of the Middle East and how the apex for World War III is on the horizon. And there was a very interesting interview that I came across done by the X22 Report, which does a lot of very good coverage of all things geopolitics, financial, etc. He was doing an interview with a gentleman by the name of V, the Guerrilla Economist, who is also the owner of RogueMoney.net. Very good summary and overview of what's been happening in the Middle East for the last 5 to 10 years. And I thought, well, instead of picking this thing apart and trying to reproduce it in a fashion that would potentially miss out some of the best details, because I've listened through this video numerous times, just listening to all the different and amazing information that's coming out of it. And I thought, you know what, I'm going to just give you this video in case you are not familiar with the X22 report, in case you are not familiar with the Guerrilla Economist or RogueMoney.net. You'll be able to hear firsthand what this interview produced and the information that it supplied, and you'll find for yourself that it is perfect. There are some, questions about whether World War III will actually really ignite, because, as the Guerrilla Economist states in this interview, he's not sure anybody has the balls to pull the trigger. And the big superpowers actually pulling the trigger and going head to head. And the fact that the U.S. is completely decimated in the Middle East, and they're pretty much on the verge of losing yet another battle in Syria, and forcing them to be in such terrible trouble when it comes to the petrodollar disappearing and their entire economy collapsing and the massive devaluation of the American dollar. It's a great interview. I highly recommend that you spend some time listening to it. It's going to be following up right after I'm done here, and I look forward to your comments and thoughts on exactly what this interview produces. So without further ado, here's the interview with the Guerrilla Economist.
Hi, and welcome to the X22 Report Spotlight. Today we have a returning guest. It is V, the Guerrilla Economist. He is the owner of RogueMoney.net. You can reach him on Twitter at @TheRogueMoney. You can also tune in every Friday at 8 p.m., and you can hear him on Revolution Radio. And I'd like to welcome him back to the X22 Report Spotlight. Welcome back, V.
Dave, it's great to be back, and I just want to thank you for this opportunity, and it's an honor for me to speak with your audience and to be on your channel.
Well, V, it's my honor to have you on here, and I really appreciate you coming on. And I want to start off out in the Middle East because things are really blowing up there. Sure. And things are getting crazy. And we see that, as everyone knows, Russia is fighting with the Syrian government, fighting the Islamic State. And we have the United States on the other side, which supports the Islamic State, which actually created them. They're the proxy army.
Correct. ISIS.
Yes.
let's call it ISIS USIS. Let's just call it by name.
I like that, USIS. Where do you see this heading? Because we see Turkey now firing. I think this is like now the 5th day in a row that they're continually firing into Syria. Where do you see this all going?
Well, it's great that you'd ask this question. I just put out a really good article on RogueMoney.net for any of the listeners that want to go check it out. It's called Not Mageddon. It's like a spin-off of the word Armageddon, so it's not Mageddon, fear and foolishness in the Middle East. I urge people to read it. Rogue Money is right now wide open for people to go ahead and check out. It's absolutely free. It doesn't cost you a dime anymore. And one of the things I want to highlight is this. The actions by Turkey is absolutely asinine. And what I mean by that is that you have Erdogan, okay? Erdogan he has this fantasy of being Salah ad-Din, which is the famous Muslim conqueror of the Middle Ages who conquered most of the Middle East and started the whole Ottoman Empire, that whole thing. Okay, now with Erdogan, he wants to be the sultan, the sultan of this resurrected neo-Ottoman Empire, and his grandiose ideas and schemes and plans to go ahead and start, pushing out his agenda upon the Middle East is going to really backfire on him. Okay, one of the things that people need to understand is that there is absolutely nothing. He can stay, in his border, of Turkey and lob shells over into Aleppo, and that's what the whole battle is about. It's about Aleppo, okay? And why people most Americans have a hard time finding Syria on a map, and they'll even have an even more difficult time trying to find Aleppo on the map. Aleppo is key because control of Aleppo, which is the northern supply town in northern Syria, which is a hub of what I call Jihad Inc., where a lot of the gun running, a lot of the weapons, supplies and logistics are flowed into. Aleppo is key. And if you notice these jihadis, these USIS terrorists, which I think is John B. Wells who coined that term, I want to give him props for that. The USIS terrorists and al-Nusra and the Free Syrian Army, who's not free and they're not Syrian, okay? Yeah. They're all hanging out at Aleppo. And the Russians have been bombing the heck out of these guys, pushing them back, and they're losing Aleppo. Whoever controls Aleppo, and this is key here, Dave, whoever controls Aleppo controls the war. Aleppo is the absolute key focal point of controlling much of the war. So if you have Aleppo, you're going to win the war. And they're losing it. So now they're lobbing shells over into Aleppo, trying to beat back the Syrian army, the real Syrian army here that's under Assad. But the Russians are providing air cover. Not only that are they providing air cover, let's look at the fact that the Russians have moved in S-400 batteries, which is at this time the most advanced air-to-air missile on planet Earth. It'll knock out anything. And they also just moved their Sukhoi Su-35 super flankers into the area. And if anybody who studies military hardware, such as myself, it's one of my passions, and I love doing it. We know that the Su-35 is probably the best. Look, I'm going to be honest with you. It is the baddest plane in the sky right now. You take a Su-35 in a dogfight against an F-22, the F-22 is going to get shredded. There's no doubt about it. So you have that airplane. So there's nothing the Turks can do to influence any sort of outcome in Syria, except try to coerce the European Union, America, and AKA basically NATO to get involved. But the NATO allies are not going to get involved, and I'll tell you why, Dave.
Okay.
First and foremost, Devletoglu, the assistant to what's his name, Erdogan, who is also Erdogan's enabler, who's another crony who's drunk on this idea of neo-Ottoman empirism, right? What the Turks are doing is this. Devletoglu recently was in Berlin, and what was he doing in Berlin? Well, he's basically threatening the European Union, saying we're going to continue to flood you guys with refugees unless you give us concessions, you give us cash, and you fast track our membership into the EU. So these Turkish guys are acting like a bunch of thugs in order to get the EU to go along with their agenda, right? So they can poke the Russian bear, get smacked by the Russians, and then start whining and crying to NATO. But the problem is what the Turks have been doing with the EU has left a bad taste. You don't threaten the EU, and then what the Turks are doing with the Kurds. Their whole thing is let's go ahead and bother, and kill Kurds, because Erdogan, what does he do? In spite of all this, he continues to commit quasi-genocide against the Syrian Kurdish, PYD, Kurdish groups, the YPG, despite ridiculous outright condemnation by the international community, who says knock it off. Even the Americans are like, yo, what are you guys doing? Just killing Kurds all the time, any chance you get. And this is a huge issue. The U.S. is not going to back them. NATO is not going to back them. And this is going to backfire against Erdogan. Because what's happening on the other side of this, Dave, is that the Russians are supplying the PYD and the YPG Kurdish resistance in northern Iraq and in northern Syria. And they're going to hit the heart against the Turks. So no matter what, the Turks coming in with armor, you have these, the Kurdish resistance fighters that will be armed to the teeth with Cornet anti-tank missiles. And the Saudis know very well about Cornet anti-tank missiles because the Saudis have been having their supply depots as well as their armored divisions blown sky high by Russian-equipped Cornet anti-tank missiles, which are the most advanced anti-tank missiles on the market. And the Houthi rebels in Yemen have been slaughtering the Saudis with it. You're going to see the same thing happen here in this entire theater of operations in northern Syria. This is going to be an absolute abysmal failure by the Turks. And if you look at the idiotic Saudis, what do these morons do? They fly a whole bunch of F-16s and they line them up in a Turkish airfield wingtip to wingtip, which is wonderful for the Saudi aircraft to do that. Because what's going to happen is when the Russians launch from the Black Sea, their Caliber cruise missiles, it'll be an easy 1, 2, 3 hit against the entire Saudi airfield. Mm. So this whole thing is not only going to blow up on the Turkish faces, but it's going to blow up on the Saudis' faces. And on top of that, it's going to lead. Okay, it's going to lead to the fact that it's going to damage the petrodollar, because this is not only a war of attrition, it's also it's a proxy war, it's asymmetrical warfare, but at the same time, it is a war for the current economic system. And that's what's going to be changing real soon here, Dave.
So do we have a certain window, not us, but the United States, Turkey, the coalition forces? Because once Aleppo falls and Russia and Syria liberate Aleppo, what happens next? What is Turkey, NATO, the U.S. going to do? Are they pretty much done at this point?
They are pretty much done. I mean, look, here's the thing. Aleppo falls, which it will. I think in the next couple of weeks, Aleppo will fall, and it's going to go into the hands of the Russians and the Syrians. When that happens, there's nothing left for the U.S. to do. They've failed in Ukraine. Okay, they're failing miserably in Syria. They're failing miserably in any sort of global trade and in global recent trade blocks that are being done, recent trade deals that are being done. The U.S. is nowhere to be seen. This is going to be another major defeat for the U.S. and for the West in general, and it's going to show the naked fascism that's being on display for the entire world to see here, Dave. That's the thing that's going to get the world saying, hey, we're sick of this nonsense. We're sick of the perpetual war. We don't want to do this anymore.
Do you see the United States maybe having some type of an event before Aleppo falls? Because if they lose Syria, that means they're going to have to back out of Syria, because there'd be no reason to, for them to be in there, because they said they were in there fighting the Islamic State. Yeah. So the coalition forces would have to back out of that. And we see already they're not doing well in Yemen. Libya's falling apart.
Yes.
Lebanon, Iraq really doesn't want them in there. So the whole Middle East and part of Africa is all starting to crumble around them.
Yep.
What do they do at this point?
There's nothing to be done. I mean, you mentioned Libya. It's very interesting. I mean, if you look at it's Muammar Gaddafi's daughter that is, frantically right now forming a new government that's going to be instilled in Libya, and it will be put together in time before Yusuf shows up over there. And Yusuf will be stomped over there because the Russians will make sure that, Libya remains intact. You look at Iraq. Iraq is being stabilized. Okay, Iraq is, and then it's not only being stabilized by the Russians, but it's also being stabilized by the Iranians. So they are losing on all fronts. The whole entire U.S. and their Western proxy groups are literally falling apart. The only way to go here is it's basically doom. It spells doom. There's nowhere else to go. I think we're getting to the point right now, Dave, where the elites kind of see this a little bit. They're starting to see this. The mid-level manager guys that make up Neocon Inc., they still not getting the picture. They think they could threaten war with the Russians, which will go nowhere. It's never going to happen. A lot of people are like, "Oh, this is World War III." It's not World War III. Nobody has the guts. I'll be honest with you. Apart from providing a few logistical standpoints, like putting a Patriot missile battery in Turkey here and there, and having AWACS fly air cover, there's going to be no engagement by the United States against what Turkey is doing in relation to what the Russians are doing. There's not going to be any sort of a retort to that, so to speak. The pullback, that's a great question. There's that multi-trillion-dollar question. What is the United States going to do after this massive loss? The only thing they can do is damage control, because they've lost this. This battle's already been lost. It's damage control now. How do we mitigate the damage and the fallout from this, number one? And number two, who can we throw under the bus? And I believe that throwing under the bus, you could expect Turkey to be thrown under the bus. Mm-hmm. You could expect Saudi Arabia to be thrown under the bus. But at the same time, massive damage will occur from this, which is the loss of the petrodollar. And that's the one thing that these guys quite haven't figured out. What are they going to do with this, with the loss of the petrodollar? The fact that the petrodollar, it's a relic at this point. They don't have a real strategy for that, except devaluation massively of the dollar is the only thing that they feel is not only a way for them to escape some of this, but to mitigate the amount of debt that they have to pay back.
So you don't think like the neocons and these warmongers are, the shadow government is going to actually try something to set this off? Because at this point, we know they don't really care and their backs are against the wall and they have nowhere else to go, because if they lose all of this, the whole system starts crumbling and falling apart. Mm-hmm. And, you know what happens when you back a wild animal into a corner. They come out with their claws and they'll do whatever they have to bite and fight their way out of there.
Yeah.
And this is what I'm a little bit nervous about, is these others that are in government, or not even in government, that are calling the shots. They might, push it to the next level just to push it because they have nothing left.
Well, we got to look at it this way. In terms of what they can do internationally, they won't be able to do anything. And I'll tell you why. They do not have the military support. It was leaked by, I think it was Seymour Hersh. Mm-hmm. His last report, which is absolutely 100% true. The Pentagon, there are people within the Defense Department that have been leaking intelligence reports to the Syrian government, to the Russians, behind the established power structure. In other words, there are huge swaths and groups within the defense and intelligence and military community that do not want perpetual war, that do not want to go along with what the neocons are doing, and are resisting what they're doing. They don't have that popular support. If you notice, every single time, how many false flag events have there been since 2001 September? There's been quite a few.
Yeah.
And how many false flag events have they been in places like Syria and the Ukraine, where they were hoping that the world opinion will be in favor of the Atlanticists or the Anglo-American power structure? None. It's all failed. It's all backfired on them. With every single false flag these morons do, all they're doing is exposing their withered hand. Okay, so they don't have that support. So the American elitists, the sycophants, the sick, twisted bastards who run a good portion of this country understand that they can't do nothing to create World War III. Otherwise, they stand to lose and get wiped out in the process. Now, you got to remember, we know who these elitists are. We know some of these names of these family members, okay? But so do the Russians. So do the Chinese. They don't have any problems taking out these guys and putting an end to their life. So do you see what I'm saying? So the problem is, the main thing is this, Dave. The biggest threat to the elites that are in America is not the Russians. It's not the Chinese. It's you. It's me. It's the American public. That's who the biggest threat is. So if there's going to be a false flag, expect a false flag to occur, which can paint an international assailant or an international enemy, but that false flag will be used they'll use that false flag to justify why the dollar's devalued, why the economy's in the doldrums, why we went off the economic cliff. It's going to be used to mitigate, so the American public won't 100% blame whoever the leadership in that structure is, because we're the threat. The thing with these elites, a lot of these guys have their safe houses, they have their islands, they have their plan B, locations. They'll bug out. They'll let the chaos ensue, and then they'll try to come back here and lick their wounds and try to rebuild this, things of that sort. But in terms of doing something to push off a major world conflict, these guys they don't stand to gain anything. and they stand to lose. Because the whole thing is this: they cannot stop the collapse. And the battle has not been about are we going to collapse or are we not going to collapse. The battle is who's going to win on the other side of it. In other words, who will be the ones who control the conversation on the other side of this thing? If it is going to be us, guys like you, myself, guys like, like Sean, all these other guys who are putting out amazing content, doing a great job with, with what you guys are doing, are we the ones who are going to formulate the opinions, help formulate the conversations and the thoughts on the other side of this collapse? Or will it be the elites who come back in with their mockingbird media, come back in with their lies and their BS, and try to control the thoughts of where America is going to be in the future? That's where the battlefield is really being formed. It's not this present stage. It's for what is ahead. So with the elites, they've already milked the system. They've extracted all the wealth. Think about this. It took 4 years for the stock market to build up to the $32 trillion worth of wealth that it built up to. But it took 7 weeks to see $17 trillion of that wealth wiped out. Of course, wealth is like energy. It's never created or destroyed. It's not destroyed. It's only transferred. So the elites have profiteered greatly, not only from the tumult in the stock market, but also the churning that's going on in the gold and silver market. They are making a bucket load of money. They want to be able to come out on the other end of this, control the conversation, buy up things again on pennies on the dollar, and continue to vertically integrate the next phase of American development. That's what the name of the game is in this whole entire thing.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think it's not whether, we're going to collapse, not going to collapse. We're heading in that direction. I think it's more of a cover-up and saving their skins. And I think this is, what they're, I guess I'll say, planning to do. And this is why they continually manipulate everything, because the way I look at everything is that they're manipulating it to get their plans in place. And they continually do this and prop everything up until they can't do it anymore. And this is what we're seeing in the economy now. We see the market fluctuating up and down. Gold went up and then it completely was suppressed once again. Mm-hmm. Where are we headed with this economy at this point?
We're heading over a cliff without a barrel. We're heading over a waterfall without a barrel. That's where we're going. You look at the manipulation, and my God, we had a run up in gold where gold went up to over $100, gained, and then it got smashed down again. That's hundreds of billions of dollars of wealth that was created in just those moves right there, with the shorting in the market and things of that sort. But understand real quick, folks, that game is going to come to an end, and I'll tell you why it's going to come to an end. April, China's launching their gold price fix. Now, people are saying to themselves, oh, well, what does that mean? Well, here's what it really means. Okay, you look at what's happening with the London price fix on gold. Deutsche Bank left it, right? They sold their seat. The Bank of China is involved. ICBC, which is the largest investment bank on the planet, which is also a Chinese bank, has bought a major gold vault, actually the largest gold vault in the world, in London, near the price fix as well, and they won in the price fix. But you look at what's going on with the Chinese price fix. It's 52 times bigger than COMEX, okay? Over 52 times bigger. It's dealing in actual physical gold and physical bullion, okay? And on top of that, on top of being the largest gold market on the planet, their requirement is that every single bank participate in the exchange, or they wind up losing their purchasing and participation rights. It's a checkmate. It's checkmate at that point. Now, the West is about to lose the price of gold. So from now until April, folks, look for some of the most volatile moves in gold and silver up until April. When that price fix is launched, you could possibly see a few more, volatile days here and there. But I guarantee you, there will be a new price fix, and there will be a complete, total divorce of the Western way of things. And here's the build-up, Dave. This is what people don't understand. This was long in coming with the Chinese. And you also have to understand, this pincer, I see a two-pronged pincer maneuver on the dollar. The first maneuver is the gold pricing, which the Chinese are completely taking away from Western hands, Western manipulation. The second thing is petroleum pricing. Who is going to be controlling petroleum pricing? Well, it's Russia. And there's an article that I put on roguemoney.net if people want to go check it out. It's called "Beware the Russian Bear Sleeps No More," and I also talk about the Chinese price fix on another article. But the Russians, look what the Russians did. About 3 years ago, the Russians bought, from Morgan Stanley their energy pricing desk. Okay, and I was probably maybe of a handful of people that talked about it. Nobody else really mentioned it. Their Platts desk was bought, but people never understood how much the gravity of that deal was, Dave. Okay, first of all, the amount that was paid was undisclosed. We don't know how much it is. I'm thinking it was in the hundreds of billions of dollars, and I'll tell you why. Because with that purchase, here's what Russia got. They got the offices of Morgan Stanley in New York, London, and Singapore. All three major hubs, all three hubs that are involved in the logistics and the pricing of oil. Okay, and for people that don't know, Morgan Stanley was a major player in the petroleum pricing industry as well as petroleum. Like, case in point, if you were an airline company, you'll be dealing with either two companies for the pricing and the hedging of your fuel. Either you're dealing with Vitol, which is the big player, or you're dealing with Morgan Stanley, which is the number two player. So at one point, companies like Delta, United Airlines, American Airlines, they dealt exclusively with Morgan Stanley for the pricing of their jet fuel, okay, for the delivery of the jet fuel. So with that deal, all those contracts, Rosneft, the Russian company, got it, okay? On top of that, all the refiners, the transport ships, everything that Morgan Stanley was involved in, they were able to get, okay? Huge, huge, massive deal. And it gives them a back office directly in New York and in London. Why New York and London is important? Well, you're dealing with WTI and Brent. WTI is I don't even know why we still price oil in WTI, because it's a dead and dying index. But at the same time, you look at Brent. Brent is also a dead and dying index, because you look at most of the oil fields that are connected to Brent, they're all running dry. They're all getting nothing. Okay, so there has to be a new player on the block. And guess what? After Russia bought all that stuff, all the intellectual rights, all the patents, all the software, all the infrastructure, what do they do? Well, on this past November 2015, what do? They launched their own oil pricing model, pricing petroleum in rubles. Now watch this. They have that set up. At the same time, here comes Iran, fresh out of the sanctions. Okay? And here comes Iraq. Iraq is falling in line with Iran. Okay? You have Libya coming online. Libya is forming a new government, again, with Gaddafi. They will be Gaddafi's daughter. They will be part of this new pricing model. You have the Iranians. When the dust settles in Syria, you're going to have Syria on board. You have the Iraqis. You have Libya. Venezuela at some point is going to be stabilized. I don't know which way it's going to go. It's too early to tell. But you're going to have a lot of players coming into this new oil pricing strategy, because OPEC is done. Look at the last OPEC meeting, Dave, that they did in December in Vienna. It was a joke. You have the United Arab Emirates, one of their biggest oil ministers, saying, we're operating, there's no point and no interest for us to operate like a cartel. We're better suited to deal with our clients on an individual basis. It's a free-for-all at this point. So here's the question. United Arab Emirates is a key player. They're in talks with the Russians. They want in. And if UAE goes in, guess who follows the UAE? Egypt. Why is that? Well, who owns 90% of Egyptian debt? United Arab Emirates. Who also sits as a member of OPEC? Well, UAE and Egypt. So you see this whole entire OPEC thing being fractured. So it is only a matter of time before the pricing and sale of petroleum is done outside of dollars, and it's already happening. Iran announced we're going to take euros, and that's a temporary fix. It keeps the West off their shoulder, so to speak, but they're giving the middle finger to the dollar. But you're seeing this whole thing change where the West is losing pricing of gold and pricing of oil, two things that are vital to their entire, house of cards, and they're losing it. And it's going into the hands of the Russians, and it's going into the hands of the Chinese. These are game changers. So this economy is going over Niagara Falls without a barrel.
You mentioned Iran, and I know Obama was pushing the P5+1 deal, and we know Congress was against it because of foreign governments. And again, we mentioned this in our last time that we spoke, that this was not about nuclear weapons or anything like that. And we see that Iran is already saying they're going to be pricing it in euros. Most likely will be switching to either yuan or rubles eventually, completely away from all the private Western type of currencies. This is going to be a huge, like you said, a huge hit, because once everyone stops using the petrodollar and this new oil system, pricing in oil, is created, what happens here in the United States? What happens when everyone stops using the petrodollar?
It's pretty much the end for us at that point. In terms of the American way of life as we've known it in the last 50 some odd years, there has to be a devaluation, and I think that's where we're headed, is a devaluation. Look at it this way. Look at some of the commodity-based currencies and economies that are out there that are right now suffering. Look at our neighbor to the north. In some parts of Canada, people are paying $15 for a carton of orange juice. They're paying $72 for a pack of 32 pack of Poland Spring water. These are real numbers. And folks, you look at the Canadian loon, you look at the loonie, Canadian dollar, and the U.S. dollar. It's pretty much on parity. Okay, but they're suffering massive inflation. That is something that we're going to be facing here as well. The destruction and the disruption that's going to occur is going to be tantamount, and this is why people need to prepare for this type of transition, because the disruptions that will occur to the very, very paper-thin supply chain that we have set up in this country, the logistical supply chain, any disruption to that, you're going to have massive problems. And when there's problems in supply chain, you could expect people to riot. You could expect people to get angry. You could expect, social upheaval in many parts of the country. Now, I'm not going to say everywhere, but I could foresee a place like New York City, going up in flames. I could see a lot of rioting happening because people are so dependent to the veneer of civilization that they won't know how to act when this whole thing goes belly up. And so it's going to be a rough time. And the worst part is our government is doing nothing to help people, prepare people, educate people, nothing. What they're doing is lying to people, putting out fictitious, the unemployment rate's below 5%. The economy is improving. It's unbelievable, Dave. Unbelievable.
Is this why we see other countries like France, for instance, with their draconian new laws, with the state of emergency? Mm-hmm. It seems like most of these governments, and I've discussed this in my reports, that they're getting prepared for civil unrest and riots because they realize what's coming.
Yep.
So we see this happening throughout Europe, and it's definitely going to happen here. And when you say the devaluation of the dollar, we're talking about inflation. We're talking about maybe even hyperinflation, where people are going to have a very difficult time going to the store and actually affording the products, or maybe there might not even be products on the shelves for them to even get at that point when this all falls apart.
Absolutely, Dave. Hyperinflation is where we're headed. I mean, there are certain numbnuts out there who've never worked a day in trading real stocks or commodities or whatnot, and guys who've never really worked in the financial industry, who like to sell their charts to you and say we're heading for deflation. The only thing deflating is their brains. Okay, I liken this to a tsunami, Dave. The first thing that happens, you have an earthquake. Okay, whether it be a global event or whatnot that's going to happen abroad, that's going to create a tectonic paradigm shift, which will create what? Well, first thing that happens with the tsunami is that the waves that are on the shore pulls back, right? Mm-hmm. Which I liken it to, money velocity crashing, or which causes a solvency crisis. In other words, there's a lack of liquidity. The waves are being pulled back off, from the shore, but that energy is being built up offshore. So you might have a temporary deflation, which we're kind of seeing right now. Okay, but that energy is being pulled offshore, and that energy is starting to build. And what is that energy being? How is it being created? Well, it's created by the tectonic paradigm-altering shift called dollars being rejected and dumped. It is caused by the loss of prestige and the image of not only the dollar, but the United States government as a whole. And that energy is being built up internationally abroad. And now that wave is getting higher and higher. And it's not if, but when that wave comes crashing through to our shores, where there's no more hidey holes for the Fed to dump U.S. treasuries into. There's no more books to cook. There's no more fictitious numbers to put out. That wave is going to come and smash us so hard, you're going to see price inflation like the likes of which we've never seen before, Dave. I guarantee that.
V, at this point, do you think they're going to be shutting down the banks to control everything?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. We're seeing capital controls going in. You got that idiot Larry Summers out there saying, we need to abolish the $100 bill.
Yeah.
And I mean, I had one of my buddies out in Hollywood. He got a letter from Chase saying that, that we're doing this for cash transactions. You got to present an ID. Capital controls are happening already. Like, remember, people might not even remember this, but, about a year ago, they were limiting wire transfers out of the country. You could only wire X amount of money out of the country. You can't, things of that sort. It's getting very, very, very difficult. And it's going to continue to get difficult. And that's why, folks, look, an industry like the banking industry doesn't spend tens of billions of dollars, $32 billion to be exact, doesn't hire 5,000 lobbyists. That means, 5 lobbyists for every congressman out there, okay, to pass the Dodd-Frank bill. And that Dodd-Frank bill is, it's 10 times bigger than the Patriot Act and Obamacare combined. They don't spend that type of money and energy to pass those laws which say we're going to bail you in, you can kiss your accounts goodbye, capital controls, you name it. If they don't expect, as an industry, for something to occur. This is not a conspiracy theory. These guys know the game is up. So they're prepared. They've passed the laws. They've, bought out the regulators to make sure that they're well insulated and protected. The question is, they're making those steps to insulate and protect themselves. What are you doing to insulate and protect yourself?
That is true. V, for my last question here, when do you think this is going to take place? I know many people have gone all the way back to 2008, and they can't believe that that we've extended this time to now to 2016. Where do you and when do you think this is going to occur?
I think, I've been saying it since 2014 that, 2016, the wheels come off on this thing. And look, man, we went into 2016 like a shotgun. The events that have occurred by the, closeout of 2015, I said, the dollar's going to be undermined as a world reserve currency. I never said it's going to fall. I said undermine, meaning its reputation, its prestige. We've seen that. We've seen the United States appeared to be as a big laughing stock on the world stage. And then 2016, we're seeing the markets losing control. We're seeing the central bankers out of tricks. We're seeing the veneer, the curtains pulled back from the power structures and those that are in power. And I think that by sometime in 2017, this thing is done. And by 2018, we're going to have the entire thing reordered. Kind of like the Economist cover back in 88, where they show that Phoenix with the burned out currencies on the floor and it's with a golden medallion around its neck saying 2018. I think that's what we're heading towards. And I think by 2017, at some point, maybe the first or second quarter, this whole thing is gone. This whole thing as we know it. You could only stretch this thing so far. Just look at it, man. The Fed's balance sheet, sitting at $4.5 trillion and growing. How do you offload this stuff? And it's funny, it amazes me. You have idiots who write for magazines such as Forbes, taking it so lightly and laughing. How can the Fed spend their balance sheet of $4.5 trillion? Maybe they should buy banks. Maybe they should buy a building. This is ridiculous. Like they're going on a shopping spree. It's asinine what's happening. And you can only stretch it so far, Dave, and we are right now stretched super thin. And I've always said this for the longest time. We are hanging on by a thread. It's not that we're hanging on by a thread. It's that you should be thinking about, hey, you know what? Okay, we're hanging on by a thread. How much time we have? The fact that we are hanging on by a thread should be the impetus enough for you to take action to do something. Whether it's if you're dirt broke, man, and you can't get gold, try to get junk silver. Try to do something. Stock up on food. I'm not telling you to go get 2-year supply of food and get 3,000 rounds of ammo. That's ridiculous. But you need to survive the first 60 to 90 days of any collapse. Talk to any expert. That's what they'll tell you. And I'm not telling you, folks, that it's the end of the world and that's it. Go huddle in a corner, get into a fetal position, eat cat food, and hope for the SWAT team to come through the door or something like that. This is a transition. This is history repeating itself. And we are moving from being the greatest thing since sliced bread, being the greatest country on God's green earth, and we are transitioning because we've allowed morons to run our country. We've allowed idiots and losers and the most unproductive human beings in the world, criminals, to control the direction of our country. We've allowed this to happen. Now we're going to face the consequences of our laziness and our apathy. So we're going to be transitioning from a first world, greatest country on the planet, to an almost second or even third world country. Will we be able to rebuild? I believe we can. But again, it depends on who's going to control the conversation on the other side of this. And I hope to God that it will be people like us, Dave, will be a clarion voice in the wilderness that is ahead.
V, I really appreciate you being on the X22 Report Spotlight. Once again, how can people see your work and listen to you? Just let us know where we have to go here.
Absolutely, folks. Check out roguemoney.net. The site's being revamped. It's exciting things that are happening. So check out roguemoney.net. We're still, there's still some, things that we're working on the site to expand it, to rebuild it, to make it, version 3.0. You could also, follow me on Twitter at the Rogue Money. I also have the Facebook page up, which is, V the Guerrilla Economist. You can follow me on Facebook. I hate Facebook, but hey, you know what? People are there. We need to have a presence there. Again, it's about controlling the conversation. So check me out on Facebook. Also, there's a fan page, Rogue Money, on there as well. And after much prodding, I've launched the YouTube channel. There's the Rogue Money YouTube channel. You can subscribe to that. It's free. Join that. All the radio shows are uploaded onto there as well. And I always drop in for like a quick, 15, 20-minute blurb on the latest recap and whatnot. And of course, I recommend everybody, if you're listening to this, subscribe to the X22 Report. I myself am subscribed to the X22 Report. I love the work Dave does. You and Sean, you guys are like my favorites. So
I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
You're welcome, man. Absolutely,
Hey.
You guys do great work.
Hey, thank you again for being on the spotlight. I appreciate it.
Yeah, you're welcome, Dave. Anytime you want, just let me know, man. God bless you. God bless your family, and God bless all of you that are out there. Be safe. Stay positive. Stay positive. Be motivated. Get educated.
Well, I have to say that video is still interesting after how many times I've already watched it. I hope that you got as much out of that daily eye-opener as I hoped you would. Please subscribe to our channel below. The Eyes Open Network is about discovering the truth and opening your eyes to things that are going on in the world around you. Do not forget to leave your comments below and open the discussion for others to open their eyes. Once again, thanks for taking the time to watch an Eyes Open Network Daily Eye Opener.